To order. Sorry for starting a little bit late. We're waiting for copies. I want to begin with roll call attendance.
Commissioner Aguirre?
Here.
Commissioner Baraba?
Here.
Commissioner Blanco?
Here.
Commissioner Dye?
Here.
Commissioner DeGiulio? Here. Commissioner Filkins-Weber? Commissioner Forbes?
Here.
Commissioner Galambos-Malloy?
Present.
Commissioner Antai?
Here.
Commissioner Rea? Commissioner Ward?
Here.
Commissioner Yao?
Here.
Okay, thank you. We've just passed out a suggestion for some detailed sub-items. I worked on this with Vice Chair Ward and with Executive Director Claypool. So I just want to give the commissioners a little time to review this. This is my take on what we would like to get done in our last 3 days for this January meeting. If we don't get these things done, of course, that pushes this off into mid-February. So if you'll just take a second to review this. I kind of front-loaded the agenda for today, and the reason is that we will be going into closed session for a good part of Thursday to interview candidates, finalists for the chief counsel position. And then on Friday, we have 3 items that we could not take up until Friday because they were not added to the agenda until Friday the 14th. So we will not actually be able to speak about them until Friday the 28th. And those include items 11, 12, and 13 on the original agenda. And the most important item of which, of course, is to replace Commissioner Elaine Kuo. So just take a second and review it, and let me know if you have any additional sub-items that you believe we need to cover sometime during our 3-day session.
Question. On today's item 8?
Yes.
On item 8, what's going on?
Beth. Yes, I.
I think I'm in a technology retrograde right now. My question is on item 8 for today.
Yeah, actually, we have an update from...
I was going to say, we are actually getting these presentations today?
Actually, we are not.
Oh.
So, like I said, I did this agenda on Monday, so so some of this is subject to scheduling. So think of them more as items we need to cover in the next 3 days. We're going to have to move a few things around just logistically. We're still trying to schedule a few things.
I'd suggest that we add I guess we would include it with the schedule, operation, and location of future meetings. If we could begin looking ahead to March to solidify that schedule.
Okay. March schedule. Any other sub-items?
Well, I guess along those lines, we had a long discussion last week about the first outreach sessions.
Yes.
And I know we have this presentation from Karen McDonald about potential locations, but
We're hoping to have.
But I feel like we need to nail down some dates, discuss some dates during these 3 meetings, regardless of where they're going to be, when they should be.
Yeah, so why don't we talk about overall phases for the outreach and potential dates.
Along the same line, I believe last Friday we decided to have a not a pilot program. We had another term for that.
A potential
A
initial.
potential initial meeting on Saturday of the first meeting in Claremont. Are we going to basically discuss that initial meeting on item either 7 or item either 8 or item 9?
Yeah. So, but I can call that out specifically.
Okay.
Okay. It's and of course we can modify this as we go. I just wanted to give everyone a chance to look at the items we'd like to come to closure on.
Also, as an initial item on number 3, can we go over all the open actions from last week's meeting? Kind of remind ourselves as to what decision we made last week that would impact this week.
Okay, I know you're volunteering to lead that discussion.
I am not.
All right. Okay.
Well, that was good. I'm following the discussion, but when I look at the agenda, are the numbering system out of whack? Or I see 1 and then number
Some of these items we've actually taken care of, so
I see.
for
Okay,
simplicity, I didn't repeat them.
that's fine. It's just a laundry list.
These were left over from the original agenda.
Oh, I see. Got it.
Is there also going to be an opportunity for maybe some feedback from council on some questions, particularly in regards to the logistics of remote access and what kind of, if there's an opportunity for that in this discussion at some point too?
Will council be ready to discuss something about that? These were, I think, a question about for our ability to do, kind of standing remote call-in centers.
Yeah, I think it's, the problem is it's a logistical and legal problem combined. You have to have a call-in center. If you're going to meet remotely, you have to comply with Bagley-Keene. So it has to be accessible to the public. The public has to be able to participate. The problem we have is, as I understand what you were asking about, the problem is what to do when nobody's going to be there and how we notify the public. And I don't know that makes sense to have each commissioner have an office where they can meet from and have that open to the public every day, every time. I mean, you theoretically could do that. It might make better sense to have some kind of more regional remote center. I take it this is for when people need to be in Southern California or Northern California and the meeting is in a different place. You can't, that's as far as I've gotten on it. Maybe you could clarify that a little bit.
Well, I think there's just, I guess I was just looking to see if there's the logistical issues versus the legal issues, and whether or not the commission decides it wants to tackle the logistical issues. But of course, that's all dependent on whether it's legal. I think
Well,
part of the issue
okay.
is again, I'm just taking Commissioner Galambos-Malloy's situation. She's officially agendized for this whole month as being, that spot should be open in Columbia because technically she's agendized for the whole month as such. So I can foresee there may be situations, whether it be a last minute or maybe there's a knowing conflict, and if that happens, while the way we've been doing it, we've had these open agendas that last for a very long time. It may only be one day, but, so maybe this is a discussion for later. But
Yes.
that's what I was hoping.
Can
is
we
maybe,
hold the discussion for
yeah,
later?
If we could get a report for council about this. It doesn't have to be today, but sometime in the next 3 days.
No, that would be fine. I remember discussing this with you, and I can get back to you on it, but we haven't got the final advice ready yet.
It might be appropriate when we actually discuss the draft agenda for February.
And that's totally fine. I
Okay.
started on that. Sorry for getting distracted then.
All right, at this point, before we begin, I would just like to open the floor and see if we have any input from the public on items either on or off our agenda today.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California, and I'm really here with just a procedural issue. It wasn't clear to me that your discussion just now was preceding your actual meeting, and whether it is or not, I would just like to say that it is very difficult among the many different things that you have to deal with that are difficult logistically. But it is hard for people here in person or on the web to follow the discussion when things like your discussion just now are about a piece of paper that no one else can see. And so I would urge you as soon as possible to put those things onto the web for the, you usually have anywhere from 20 to 40 people watching at any given
Right.
time, or as a handout for people here in the audience. And I think you understand that many people, and I'm one too, who will be watching more from the web, over the web, than from the audience. And I apologize that you're often speaking to what looks like an empty or a non-existent audience, but in fact there is a considerable one. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Yeah, we know people are watching us, and I want to apologize to the public that we had a bit of a miscommunication this morning, and ask for the public's forbearance. Our poor executive director is getting direction from 14 people and desperately trying to add staff right now. So if we are not quite as organized as we'd like to be, I apologize. And actually, the other commissioners only saw it this morning as well, so that's why I gave them a few minutes to look at this. And this is not a change to the agenda. This was just a little more detail so that we can keep ourselves organized and make sure that we cover everything that we need to cover in the 3 days that we have left of this meeting. So, so with that, let me, for the benefit of the public, who I guess it hasn't been posted yet, has it? Okay, so so I will just announce each of these items, and actually this is going to move around a little bit because we have some updates from staff on what we're actually going to be able to do today.
Cynthia, maybe make it clear to the public that what's happening here is when agenda items are referred to by number, the number is the number on the posted official agenda, and these are, in fact, just sub-items which fall under those numbered items. So there's not a new agenda that hasn't been noticed. This is just detail. And
Right.
I think you said that, but I wanted to make that point very clear to anybody listening.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rickards. And again, this is one of the things that we struggle with, the balance between efficiency and transparency here, that we want the public to know what we're talking about, but it's often difficult to identify the detailed sub-items 14 days in advance. So the agenda, as a result, ends up being very, very broad. So this is something we'll try to get in the practice of putting sub-items so that it's more clear specifically what we're talking about on any particular day. So one thing you may notice is that a few of us are sitting in different places today. And one of the suggestions that I had to staff was since we are going to be rotating the chair and the vice chair for each sequence of meetings, that because of our setup here for ease of broadcasting, that it would be easier for the chair and vice chair to kind of bookend the commission, so we can see all the other commissioners and be able to recognize them when they want to speak. So that's just so we can keep the meeting running efficiently. And then there's actually no reason that we should sit in any particular order. So if you want to get to know a new commissioner, then feel free to move around in the meetings. But I think it's probably a good idea if the chair and vice chair can see everyone in the meeting. I noticed for myself personally that I tended to only look one way and ignore the other commissioners, and that would be bad if I'm chairing the meeting. So that's just a logistical thing. I also want to make a few comments about our adherence to Robert's Rules of Order. And this was, I'm channeling Commissioner Filkins-Weber right now. And she noted that our adherence to Robert's Rules has not been very strict. We probably fall kind of on the borderline between what's considered a small board, which allows kind of more informal use of Robert's Rules, and I think every commissioner has been extremely respectful at, allowing other commissioners to speak, but I would ask everyone to keep in mind that if we have a motion on the floor and somebody else has not had a chance to address it yet, that we let everyone speak before you speak a second time on the issue. And we'll try to do a better job of keeping straight what we're voting on, because I've noticed that several times that it was confusing exactly what we were voting on. So we'll try to announce what vote is required and exactly what we're voting on, and make sure people are clear about that moving forward. Okay. There are a couple of items that I wanted to take under item number 3, Commission Governance. We're going to need a little time on the ED report. Okay. So we are going to talk about the membership for the subcommittees, but we'll do that this afternoon because we're still compiling those lists, and we'll get that out to everyone. One item I wanted to talk about because it affects future meetings. As I mentioned, on Friday will be our first opportunity to actually discuss specific candidates to replace Commissioner Elaine Kuo. And those of you who watched the first 8 commissioners select the slate of the final 6 know that we had a lot of discussion at our second to last gathering about how much time to allow for public input. I think it's important that we have a discussion on what is practical in this case, given that if we make this decision on Friday and decide that we're going to wait for public input, that would not allow us to make a decision until February 9th when we gather again. And that probably means that the new commissioner would not be able to be sworn in right away. So I would like this commission to talk about this and see if we can have some agreement about allowing for public input, but also understanding that we are required by the Voters First Act to replace Commissioner Kuo within 30 days. We will have burned 14 days just to do the public notice, and then we're not meeting again until February 9th. So would any commissioners like to comment on this?
I would suggest that because the list is relatively short, 7 names on the list, that we formally solicit the public input starting immediately, so that we have all the input necessary to make a decision by Friday whenever we meet and discuss that particular topic. I think given all day today, all day tomorrow, that's longer than the period that we solicit public input the previous time. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Commissioner Forbes?
Yes, I would agree. Because I think this is a somewhat less complex decision, where we had 6 moving pieces. We had lots more to consider, I think. So I think it's easier for the public to comment on our just a selection of one.
Commissioner Barada?
We were able to get the feedback from the previous exercise on each of the individuals, so it's not like we haven't heard how the public feels about them.
Anyone want to make a formal motion on this?
I will move that we, by this particular discussion, seek public input on all 7 candidates so that we will have all the input necessary to make the decision this coming Friday.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that by this motion that we are announcing to the public that if you have a comment on any of the 7 candidates for the Democratic spot that has been vacated by Commissioner Lane Kuo, please to go ahead and submit that before our meeting on Friday, when we will be actually making that selection process.
Could you give maybe a more specific deadline for people so they know they can't do it that morning?
What do you suggest, Commissioner Rial?
By starting at the meeting on Friday morning.
Okay, by 9:30 then, Friday. Please make sure that you get your public comment in, and if staff could, as usual, provide us with printouts with any last-minute feedback so that we have that in front of us. At the December meeting, I think we had 110 public comments, as I recall, so it was substantial, and we will break if necessary, if there's last-minute comment to review that so we can fully appreciate all the comments that were taken in. Is there any further discussion on this? Okay, so I'd like to do a voice vote.
Let's seek the public input first.
Thank you. Is there a member of the public who would like to comment on the motion that we're considering right now, which is to basically close public comment on a replacement commissioner by 9:30 Friday this week, so that we can make a decision and seat the commissioner as soon as possible? Seeing no one approaching the podium, I think we can go ahead and vote on this topic. So all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Any abstentions? Okay, great. That's unanimous. So again, we'll invite the public to peruse the applications, the videos. We have transcripts of the interviews for all the applicants. All of this information is up on the website, and we look forward to any additional input that we receive. As Commissioner Baraba pointed out, we've actually had significant input already on individuals, and it should actually be easier this time since you don't have to comment on the full slate. Great. At this point, I'd like to move to item 7. I believe that we'll have an update from staff on where we are on chief counsel interviews, as well as where we are on the communications director position.
Thank you, Commissioner. We currently have all of the chief counsel candidates have replied and are scheduled to come for the interview. And I have interviewed all 3 of the candidates for our public information officer. They are all good candidates, and I will be prepared to give you my recommendations in closed session for the person that I believe is most qualified and second qualified and so forth. So for those 2 positions, that's our current status. We also are posting the job description for our budget officer, and I will finish the interviews for the administrative assistant, and we should be coming on to fully staffed as soon as we can come to an agreement. All of this should be done by Friday.
Excellent. Do you need us to go into closed session sooner than Thursday? Would you like us to go into closed session sooner than Thursday?
Yes, for the, if we could include the communications officer, that would be very important.
Okay, great. We can do that in a bit. Let's not do that right away. I think at this point, are we ready for an update on item 10 and how we're going to move forward on training for the commission?
I can give you an update as to where we're at with the Secretary of State's office. They were checking at the last time I spoke with Ms. Mejia, she was checking to see whether or not they could get the sexual harassment training scheduled for this week, or whether or not they could provide it as an online course. And so she's working with logistics on that. It was fairly short notice for her. So I will have more information immediately after lunch.
Okay. And just for the public's benefit, because we're technically state employees, we are required to go through some required training by the state. I have a feeling that none of us are going to be very amused if we have to do sexual harassment training in March. So we are attempting to get some of this training out of the way right now. So with that, let's go to item number 9, which is the schedule, operation, location of future meetings. I have a suggestion for the first item, an update on the logistics for the Claremont location for our February meeting. And I wonder if Commissioner Yao has some details for us there.
All right, I met over the weekend with the university CEO, and let me just comb through everything on my list. Stop me if you have any questions. I have it categorized by roughly 10 items. As far as the main meeting space, this is the first of 3 rooms that will be required. They're going to take Tuesday to do the setup, move furnitures around, and test everything. And from the 9th through the 13th, I believe 13 is a Sunday, all the rooms will be available to us, not just the main meeting rooms, but one room for closed session plus subcommittee use, and then another room strictly for subcommittee use. And then the third subcommittee, in the event that we hold 3 parallel sessions, can be held at the main meeting space. The facility will have a large and wide U-shaped table that will seat 14 commissioners, and multiple power strips under the head table, skirts for the head table and the staff table, and a 3-person staff table either at the end of the head table or adjacent to the head table for staff. Is 3 adequate? I see we have 3 in this particular setting.
Yes, 3 will be adequate.
All right. There will be approximately 50 to 100 audience chair in the room. And immediately outside the room will be a large display to broadcast the live stream for overflow seating, if necessary. Probably another 50 to 100 audience. Audio visual setup for audio and live video streaming. And there will be additional video camera and still camera in the event that we want to capture the event in above and beyond the live streaming. We specify that the camera should be able to capture the entire head table without having to pan back and forth. I believe that's the feature we have over the last couple meetings. There'll be a literature / check-in table at the back of the room. They offer to provide nameplates. I don't know whether we need that or not, or whether we can just take these with us. We agree that name tags will not be necessary. The closed session room, the second room, we'll need it for all the days that we meet. There'll be table seating for 20 people with a microphone, wireless internet, power, and a few audience chairs. And as necessary, we can move more chairs in from the main room if the audience chair exceed the number of people that are interested in participating in this second subcommittee meeting. The first subcommittee meeting, as I said, will be in the main space, so there'll be plenty of space for plenty of audience seating for that. And then the third room, which is strictly going to be used for subcommittee, also will be close to the main meeting space. And this will be the smallest of the three rooms. Table seating for a total of 8 commissioners and staff. And a few audience chairs. Again, we can move more chairs in as needed from the main space. Any questions on the space itself? As far as technology is concerned, there'll be wireless internet access in the main space. There'll be a projector and screen. If we need them, we just basically have to let them know ahead of time. There'll be audio capability, which means wire mics and mixing boards and so on. And I specify 1 mic for each 2 commissioners, but in this particular case, they're going to provide individual microphones. And also, they will have capability to allow any media to plug into the audio system so that they don't have to use their remote mics. There'll be a standing mic for the public input. Live streaming capability, they're going to test with their webcam and laptops, etc. Lapel microphone if we need them for the speakers. And I mentioned that we're going to have still camera and audio equipment to record the event above and beyond the live stream if we want them. And I asked for the feature of immediate shut-off of all the microphones at the break period, as compared to individually shutting off the microphones at the table. Signage. Translators. There'll be a sign language translator. There'll be a Spanish language translator with wireless receivers for up to 10 people. And I suggest to them that we welcome community volunteers as compared to hiring of pay translators. I believe that these services are going to be directly requested through the website of us. And if we don't have any need for them, then we won't have it available. Is that the understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the agenda, we'll, of course, ask people to let us know if they need
So we'll
special
ask them to let
accommodation.
us know, let's say 5 days before the meeting, so that they can either activate the equipment services and ask the people to come in. And if we don't get that request within 5 days of the meeting, then we will not have it available. Is that
reasonable?
Is that reasonable? All right. There'll be coffee, water set up immediately outside the main reading room. There'll be a water pitcher with glasses on the table. Signage, directional signage to help the audience find the event. This would include 3 large posters at each of the entrance plus wayfinders within the building. I also suggest that a welcome citizens redistricting committee sign is not necessary. Security, there'll be at least 2 and maybe 3 campus safety officers assigned to this event at all time. One will be stationed outside, 1 inside the room, 1 outside the building, 1 inside the room, 1 outside the room. There'll be plenty of parking available on city streets immediately surrounding the facility. And I asked for reserved parking for the commissioners traveling by car to the event, so let us know ahead of time if you're driving directly to the event so that we can block off a space for you. There'll be room for reporters, cameras in the back of the room. As I mentioned earlier, they'll have capability to plug directly into the audio system as compared to using their remote mic. And also outside the building, there'll be space for news vans and powers and so on for the van. Lunch will be served at the library cafe. It'll be a buffet lunch. The cost will be $10 to all those who would want to eat lunch. There will be a rope-off area strictly for the commissioners. And the way it's going to work is you pay $10 and then you get a receipt immediately. Some of the other things that we're going to that we have considered is a mail address will be available for us to use if we want to bulk ship the literature or whatever ahead of time to Claremont as compared to have staff carrying it with them. Point of contact has been identified for the administration of this event and also the technology a person for the event. There will be a place to store your suitcases on the first day if you come directly to the meeting room, and also for the last day if you intend to leave directly from the meeting. So all the laptops will be secure at break and at lunch. There will be maps for visitors, and maps will be available for us to be posted. Both maps for the normal entrance and maps for the ADA entrance. There to help us to promote the public meeting, the CRC's public meeting. And we will have use of all the necessary office equipments like reproduction machines and so on. So I think everything is pretty set as far as the physical arrangement is concerned. And now, I asked whether they would welcome to offer us the option of using the Claremont facility for the second half of the February meeting. And because of the uncertainty associated with that meeting at this point in time, they declined to make that option available to us. So unless we pin it down saying we definitely want them to provide it to us, in which case they will be happy to. But just asking to hold it just in case we need it, they're not willing to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Yao. That was extremely thorough. I think that gives the rest of the commission an idea of all the detail that's required to host a commission meeting. And really appreciate that that Commissioner Yao volunteered to take this on and to arrange all of these details in the absence of being fully staffed right now. Yes, Commissioner Bravo.
Yes, I would suggest if we can get a listing of that, that would be really good for us as we go to other facilities.
Yes, I'll email this to Ann, and she can probably make corrections to it as necessary, or make it less specific to Claremont and for our use in future setups.
Can I make a comment here? What Commissioner Yao just stated is a good example of what event planners do, and it's, well, admirable what he did. I'm not an event planner,
Nope.
and I don't think most of us are, and there are people that specialize in this. Because I've contacted San Diego State University, San Marcos State University, UCSD, and all of them are willing to host our events. But these are questions that are being raised are similar to what some of the specifics that Commissioner Yao had mentioned, that they are asking of me, and
Right.
I'm unable to answer that.
Yes.
So I think we'll have to address how we're going to get our staff to interface with what our effort is going to be, and how we're going to outline all of these details in venues that we're going to start outlining in the future. But this has to be done.
Right. And I think it's just a matter of not having enough staff right now, right?
Well, I have worked on this list. It had been asked for earlier by Commissioner Guillermo-Malloy for her use with the Oakland venue. It will be done today. I wanted to run it by Commissioner Yao, the actual list that I put together, and then we should have something that we can hand out that will be beneficial as a starting point to make sure that they know the technical needs that we need.
Great.
Just out of curiosity, Commissioner Yao, how much of this are they providing in kind, or do we have any cost estimates with this? Did they provide that? I'm just curious as a baseline for the rest of us as well, too.
The offer they made to us is that they're willing to pick up all the costs that we ask them to pick up, okay? So if on any of these things that I mentioned, if we want to pay for it, then they're not going to fight us. But for the time being, they're picking up all the costs. And also, they're going to basically track all the costs and provide that number to us. Not only do they have to file a report, the gift to the state report, but I also want to review that to future sponsors so that they can tell how much it's going to cost them, because if you add up the staffing costs, it's significant. So,
and let me add on to that. With the public institutions that I talked to, the question was, well, we can't pay for this. How are we going to do this? And I've told them, well, we're both state agencies. So it's taking money out from one pocket and put it into the next. But we'll try to work on something. So that's a good question that we have to iron out.
What is the name of the building that we're going to be in? Do you know?
it's called a Honnold Library. This is
Can you spell that?
Honnold.
Thank you.
The exact address will be, I'll provide that, all the details to.
I want to get a campus map and.
Right,
get an
right.
idea
All
what
the
it is.
maps will be provided in time.
And don't worry, we have to put on the agenda anyway.
Right, right.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the Claremont meeting and then an update about Oakland. The question is regarding evening use of the space. Is it available for use in the evening?
The space is ours to use, and it's not limited to 9 to 5. It's basically, we can use it as long as we want, so. I haven't specifically asked them at this point in time, but the understanding is that the library, by the way, is open extensive hours, so it's
It's a good choice.
yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the logistical item here?
As far as the hotels and the evening programs, I don't think we need to address that in this meeting, but all that has also been arranged.
Okay. So, yes, and Commissioner Galambos-Malloy brought up another item that we should discuss, which is alternate locations for the second half of February. And we will have to amend our agenda no later than the first day that we meet in order to meet the public notice requirement. So we do have until February 9th to make a final decision, but it would be helpful to hear what our options are. So go ahead.
Well, Oakland is definitely an option. I spoke with Mayor Jean Kwan's staff, and they would be happy to host us. Given how many commissioners we are, the council chambers is not the best location to have us and facilitate the public involvement. On the second floor of the City Hall, there's what they call a media room, and it has more flexibility in terms of setup, and it's also wired to do the things we need to do for the live streaming, et cetera. So based on the conversation we're having now, I can go back and finalize some of the technological specifications, but based on the fact they do many of the same things that we're wanting to do, our thinking is that it will work. They are in the process, they rescheduled a couple of standing committee meetings that the city has in order to accommodate us and to free up some subcommittee spaces as well. The location is right downtown above the 12th Street City Center BART, and so it's very accessible for folks coming from different locations. There are hotels within 2 to 3 blocks, many places to eat, so I think it will work for our use. And so they've blocked the dates that final week of February, including Saturday and Sunday. The main questions, in addition to the technological questions that they had, were at what point we would know for sure if we'd be needing evening use of any of the spaces, and at what point we'd be able to confirm or release the weekend days. So that's a question I wanted to pose to the commission.
Okay, I don't know if we have an answer to that yet, but definitely it's something we will have to take up by the 9th. Any other options?
I did contact the city of Visalia as an option, which is halfway between Bakersfield and Fresno, and they are very interested. The problem we're going to run into with a community like Visalia being a smaller community is they don't have the capacity to do live streaming. They are similar, they don't have the city meeting space. Their chamber council is much smaller, but they did suggest the convention center. The school district also does have the ability to stream meetings, but not, it's one of those, she wasn't exactly sure the details, but basically they stream it and that's it, it's out there in space. It wasn't, unless our staff can capture it. But the problem with the school district is during the regular business hours, oftentimes those meeting spaces are used. So at this point, if the rest of the commission is interested, I could also begin to look at, I would suggest Fresno as opposed to Bakersfield, because Fresno is more centrally located, and I think with some of the universities there and being a bigger city, we might have a better chance. But in terms of the end of February, I'm not sure if that, I can check in the next few days, but and have something to report on before we end the session. But Visalia, I would think at this point, unless we're okay with not live streaming, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I would say if we can live stream, we should. So if we have other options, we might look at those first. Commissioner Ward?
I was just curious as to whether or not there'd be an advantage for us as a commission to plan on meeting back in Sacramento after Claremont, the meeting immediately following, just because, again, most of our critical resources are located here. We'll have a whole new staff on board, facilities trying to set up, things like that. And I think, again, getting out is good, but perhaps in between off-site business meetings, we should plan on coming back to this vicinity just so we can, again, coordinate with staff and be connected to our critical resources.
Yeah, I think Sacramento is definitely an option. Were there any, I know other people were starting to look into things, anything else that is a real option for the second half of February? So we have Sacramento, we have Claremont, and Oakland, it sounds like, are kind of options that we could pull the details together and be able to notice it adequately by February 9th. Any others? I think 3 options are good. So we don't actually have to make a decision on this right now. I just wanted to throw that out. Go ahead.
I got the sense from Commissioner Malloy that it would be helpful if we did try to make a decision so that they could start getting arrangements made. And I like Commissioner Ward's suggestion about coming back here on this second part of February, so I think it's easier for the staff to get prepared, and then we can commit to March for both Oakland and Fresno. And I think Fresno is a much better location. So we could probably make that kind of a decision now, and then that way if I could start working on getting it done.
It would be great if I could get some dates for March that I could work with. If Oakland is something the commission wants to pursue, that way they can go ahead and lock those dates in for us.
Is there a scheduled subcommittee of the outreach program this trip?
Well, actually, the next item on the agenda was actually to talk about the agenda, where we will have to, by notice. So again, we can make a decision whenever we like. I just wanted to let the commission know when we had to make a decision,
Yeah,
so.
I think it would be best for everybody's, if we could do that.
So, Commissioner Yao?
I think Commissioner Jody Weber suggested that March would be a good time to hold it at University of California, Riverside. I think she is working actively to solicit that site for March. The reason is, I think that's a downtime for the university, and the facility is readily available. So maybe before we make the decision on March, maybe postpone it for a few hours until we can get her input to us.
Yeah,
as well.
she'll be back a little bit later, so go ahead, Commissioner Blanco.
So I'm thinking that maybe we should decide that, make a decision today, now, about that second February meeting being held or not in Sacramento. On that point, we have so many moving parts to this commission and expenses related to the commission. And I do think we should focus the time that we're going to be out in alternative locations. We should think about that more for the outreach meetings and then for the meetings when we present the maps. Which is not to say that if, if we want to explore this UC Riverside option or Oakland, but I really think, paying the expense of staff, not just us, but all the staff to go down, and then with all the stuff, it'll be a bigger staff by then, hopefully, and they'll all have to be there for, we think, not all, but
Definitely not all.
there are some key people that will probably have to come along to these meetings and who then won't be in their offices, and so I just think it's a nice idea to alternate, but let's think about that more for the meetings and not through, for the outreach meetings and not so much for our business. If this is basically working because we've got the we've got all the technology in place here.
I just want to point out that we probably will not have this location available after this month. Is that a correct assumption?
We haven't broached that with the Secretary of State, and so we'd have to ask. However, we do have the capital, and so we have a very good option insofar as the facilities are concerned.
Okay, then maybe I'd like to make a motion that the second February meeting be held in Sacramento.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the latter half of February that we hold the commission business meeting back here in Sacramento. So let's have some discussion about that. Go ahead, Trial.
A method of doing outreach is having the commission being out in the public, not necessarily just doing the outreach. I find that having the commission going down to Southern California as an entire commission is generate a lot of excitement in terms of people wanting to get involved with the process. Yes, our business meeting is pretty dry, and I can't see how anybody would want to spend 8 hours listening to us on these kind of detailed discussion. But nevertheless, having the community see the entire commission in one setting probably is a good thing. So it may be convenient to hold it in Sacramento, but I think that should be our last resort. And if we, for example, if San Jose is ready to host us during the second half of February, Oakland, I'm sorry, I really would want to push for that to happen. Again, having the commission working at various parts of the state is a strong message as compared to we're just here in Sacramento.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Julio.
I do agree with Commissioner Yao to the extent that we do want to get ourselves out there as much as we can, but I think the overriding issue here is the wise use of our time. I think that if we have the ability to meet in Sacramento, we don't have to deal with some of the logistics. I know that I like the idea of kind of going maybe back and forth, touching base in Sacramento and still continuing to do those meetings. But, and I don't know if Commissioner Galambos-Malloy is seeing this too, but just kind of initially doing some outreach, Commissioner Antai, it does take a back and forth and logistics. I think we've been very fortunate with Commissioner Yao having those connections and starting us off, but I really don't think we'll be quite as fortunate or have that much of an direct connection. Maybe some people will, but I'm just concerned that we use our time right now to focus on the business meetings and then use our community outreach as the point where we really go out there. So maybe we can mix it up a little bit. So at least for now, I like the idea of coming back to Sacramento.
Commissioner Baraba?
Yeah, and this motion is only for the second week in
correct,
February,
yeah.
so
Yeah,
it's not
that's all.
precluding us from moving out.
Exactly.
Commissioner Ward?
I agree that the motion is just for this weekend, but I couldn't help but take the opportunity to feel a little heartwarmed because I know the panel's heard from me ad nauseum about this issue, and I hear some of my similar concerns from last week being raised this morning, and I just want to echo them. That again, I think there's a little difficulty for me in understanding what the mission difference is between outreach and between business meetings. As we continue to evolve to discuss these things, they tend to blur. When we talked about Claremont specifically, again, as I mentioned last week, there were some very definitive goals with that, very defined reasons why we were going down to Claremont, and none of them were to just get out into the community. They were budget reasons. They were logistical reasons that made sense. So it wasn't, at least as I understood it, when we took the motion, the goal wasn't to, the main goal was not to do outreach. It was literally a logistical and budget issues were met by meeting in Claremont and doing business there. And it also did make some sense to take the business meeting down south. We're talking about two completely different areas. And the facilities were ready available thanks to the great work of Commissioner Yao. So that made sense. But that seems to kind of evolve now into a traveling business plan, and I think that's an entirely different discussion that needs to have some definitive, defined goals between outreach and between moving around as business, and we need to define a mission, a statement kind of for each one, or something like that, so that we can, better make preparations. Because if we are going to start a traveling business meeting, then we really do need to talk about how to piggyback outreach and things like that off of it, which again changes kind of the whole scope and vision of what I understood we were considering to date. So, thank you.
Any other commissioners who have not yet spoken would like to speak on this topic? I just wanted to build on Commissioner Ward's comment. It actually was budget reasons that was the original driver, which is we were going to get free facilities, and most of our commissioners are actually down there, so travel expenses would actually be reduced by meeting in Southern California. At this point, I'd like to open it up for public comment on the motion that the commission is considering, which is to actually hold a second half of the meeting in February in Sacramento. Would any members of the public like to address the commission on this topic? Okay, no one is approaching the mic, so let me bring it back to the commission. Any further discussion before we take a vote on this topic? Commissioner
Let me
Gray.
just add that I certainly appreciate the fiscal and logistical questions related to this. It would be great if there were opportunities for institutions like UC Riverside, maybe UCSD, other public facilities that would provide space and cover the cost the way that Claremont has done. Of course, we're lucky that Mr. Yao did the great work that he has done, and his connections certainly are very strong. But ultimately, if we can work out the financials in other areas of California where the cost for providing the carrying out business meetings would not be fully borne by the commission, I think we should consider that. The other thing about the logistics aspect of it is that Mr. Yao, in the absence of staff, kind of put it on his shoulders to make sure that all of those items were covered, and I think he did a terrific job with that, and certainly set a template that we can use at other places. But as far as the logistics is concerned, that's why we're hiring a staff. So as far as the staff, they will be available, I think, that given a suggestion to, in this case, maybe go to Oakland very soon after perhaps our February meeting, we decide to come back in Sacramento the latter part of February, then it's not going to fall on Ms. Malloy to do the setup. It's going to fall on our staff, and as far as having business meetings are concerned, I don't think we have to carry our whole staff. I think our council, our executive director, and perhaps 2 or 3 other staff would be sufficient for us to carry on the meeting. And certainly, the importance of outreach is not to be undervalued, but also the idea of having a business meeting, the actual business of the commission throughout the state of California, is a way of validating geographic regions of California that certainly have felt underrepresented and untouched by the process. So for us to go out there and to validate those areas by scheduling business meetings, I think would be a wonderful thing. And so if we can work it out with our schedule, we can work it out with logistics with our staff, and perhaps if we can share cost, I would say that it would be great to continue to have these meetings, business meetings throughout California, in addition to doing all of the outreach that we need to do.
Commissioner Blanco.
So I know we have to vote on this specific motion, and I think we should, but I'd like to say that after we vote on that, or it's a little tricky, is that this, because I definitely have reactions to the suggestions about the business meetings being in different locations, but I don't want to, I'm willing to withdraw my motion, and then we have a larger.
Just call for the question.
Well,
or
you can, like I said, you can withdraw your motion because, we can agree to make a decision before Friday. We don't have to make it right this minute. I know that 2 commissioners who are not here today, both were working on alternate locations. Commissioner Raya was going to contact the city of San Jose, who had also made this generous offer, although it was unclear whether they wanted that as part of outreach or wanted a commission business meeting. And Commissioner Filkins-Weber was also working on alternate locations. So we could, not vote on it right now.
What I'd like to do is vote on the second meeting.
Okay.
And then what I'm suggesting is that, I don't know if it's already on the agenda in some form or another, that we have the subsequent discussion about where there seems to be differences, I think we can work them out, but differences about the business meetings
Versus
rotating
outreach.
geographically.
Right.
So,
Okay.
could that be put on the agenda?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, so any other commissioner want to weigh in on this before we vote? Okay, so again, the Commissioner.
Just one comment related to Maria's suggestion. I stand in support of the motion for reasons that were brought up by Commissioner Ward, which were that we're going to have a new staff, and after this week, if we don't get to meet them soon, then that's not good teamwork. So I think that in order for us to do the good work that we're going to do, then the whole team needs to meet together, and we need to be facile with the mission, and we need to know each other face to face so that we know that we're all in this together. So for that reason, then I'm in support of the motion.
Okay, so again, the motion is very narrow. It's strictly about the meeting for the second half of February. And again, the motion on the table is to come back to Sacramento for that meeting. Do we need to have a roll call vote on this, or are people comfortable doing a voice vote?
Voice vote.
Yes, Commissioner Antai? Could you speak into the microphone, please?
So the second half of February, we're looking at the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
What were those dates again?
The 23rd, and again, potentially running through the weekend, which would be the 27th, but probably at least the 23rd, 24th, and 25th.
So those are the specific dates to conduct business, and the motion is to have that meetings done here in Sacramento.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to try a voice vote, and if we need to have a roll call, we will. All those in favor for the second half of February, again, those are February 23rd, running potentially through the weekend, which is the 27th, to move the meeting back to Sacramento, and again, it may or may not be in this particular facility. We're just specifying a city right now. All those in favor, please specify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries, and it was unanimous that we will come back to Sacramento. I thought it was an excellent point Commissioner Gary made, because we should hopefully be fully staffed by then. It is 10:45, time for a bio break. So let's have a 10-minute break. Yes, Commissioner Yao?
Before we break, may I suggest that we try to have that meeting at the Capitol as compared to be at this facility? Because in the long run, if we were to continue having meetings in Sacramento, it's more likely to be at the Capitol than it is at the SOS building because of the weekend issue. I don't think we want a vote, but I would like to make that as a suggestion to see if we can try to make that happen.
I think that's the only facility that's been offered to us so far in Sacramento, so no other offers, right? So
Thank you.
that probably will be the default decision. So let's go ahead and, yes.
Can I clarify, are we going to come back after the break to revisit the longer-term plan for our meetings?
Yeah, we can do that. I would like everyone to know that we are going to break early for lunch at 11:30 because apparently we as a commission need some training on how to do our expense reports. So we won't bore the public with those details. And one other thing we need to do today is approve the agenda for our February meeting, and I wonder if we want to do that first. So we can do one or two of those things and bring this up after lunch. I think the agenda is a little more urgent, so we will get those passed out. You can review it over the break, and we'll be ready to discuss it.
I suggest that on the February agenda, we can discuss it, but don't have the commission approve it. Otherwise, you set a precedent that's very difficult to follow. I think having the chair and the vice chair working with staff to set up the agenda is a more workable process. Otherwise, if we as a group have to approve the agenda, then any changes to the agenda we would have to approve, and that would make it very awkward to follow. So I suggest we don't we can discuss it, but we
Right.
don't
I would like
approve
each
it.
commissioner to see it, just because it's the first time we're going to be doing subcommittees. So, so at least we can look at it. So with that, let's take a break. Can we try to come back at 5 till? Okay, thanks.
Short. 3-2.